It's been called America's Dyatlov Pass, a perplexing mystery that has baffled investigators and armchair detectives for over 4 decades. What really happened to the 5 young men from Yuba County who vanished into a snowy mountain wilderness on a cold February night in 1978? Today, we're diving deep into the strange and tragic case of the Yuba County 5. Our story begins on February 24, 1978. 5 friends Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, Jackie Hoot, Ted Weiher, and Bill Sterling piled into Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego. They were all from Yuba City, California, and were headed to Chico, about 50 miles north, to cheer on their favorite local basketball team in a college tournament. These weren't just any group of friends. All of them, except Mathias, had mild intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions. They were known locally as the Boys, a close-knit group who functioned well within their supportive families and community. They loved sports, and this basketball game was the highlight of their week. After the game, which their team won, they were seen stopping at a local market to buy snacks and drinks for the ride home. It was around 10 p.m. This was the last time they were definitively seen alive and well. When the men didn't return home that night, their parents immediately knew something was wrong. This was completely out of character. They were reliable and always checked in. A massive search was launched, but it yielded nothing. The days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of the men or the car. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Then 4 days later, on February 28th, a forest ranger made a baffling discovery. He found Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego parked on a remote snow-covered mountain road in the Plumas National Forest. The location was bizarre. It was about 70 miles from Chico, far off their intended route back to Yuba City, and in the opposite direction. The car was stuck in a snowdrift, but it was in perfectly good working condition and had about a quarter tank of gas left, more than enough to turn around or run the heater for warmth. The keys were gone. Inside the car, investigators found the wrappers from the snacks they had bought in Chico, emptied milk cartons, and neatly folded basketball programs. There were no signs of a struggle. The car was unlocked, but the men were gone. Stranger still, the car showed no signs of being forced off the road, and evidence suggested they could have easily pushed it out of the shallow snowbank. Why did 5 grown men abandon a perfectly functional car in the middle of a freezing night, in a desolate wilderness? They didn't know. This was the first of many questions that would haunt this case. The search for the men themselves was hampered by a severe snowstorm that blanketed the area shortly after the car was found. For months, the mountains held their secret. The snow was too deep, the terrain too treacherous. The families waited in agony, holding onto a sliver of hope that their sons would be found alive. That hope was tragically extinguished in early June, as the snow began to melt. On June 4th, a group of motorcyclists stumbled upon a gruesome scene. They discovered a Forest Service trailer at a remote campsite, about 20 miles from where the car was abandoned. The window had been broken to gain entry. Inside, they found the body of Ted Weiher. He was lying on a bed, wrapped in 8 sheets, as if someone had tried to keep him warm. An autopsy later revealed he had starved to death. He had lost nearly 100 pounds. It was estimated he had survived in that trailer for as long as 8 to 13 weeks after the group first went missing. This discovery only deepened the mystery. In a storage shed next to the trailer, there was a massive stockpile of rations and other canned food enough to feed all 5 men for a year. The cans had been opened, but only a small amount of the food had been eaten. There were also matches and paperback books, but no evidence that a fire had ever been lit in the trailer's fireplace, despite plenty of available fuel. Why would Ted Weiher starve to death when a feast was just a few steps away? And where were the other 4 men? The discovery of Weiher's body refocused the search efforts in that area. The following days brought more grim findings. The remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found about 7 miles away from the trailer, on opposite sides of the road. It appeared they had succumbed to hypothermia. Madruga's body had been partially scavenged by animals. Jackie Hoot's bones were found 2 days later, a short distance from Sterling's remains. His father was the one who positively identified them by the jeans and shoes found nearby. Now, 4 of the 5 men had been found, but 1 man remained missing, Gary Mathias. To this day, his fate is unknown. Mathias had a history of schizophrenia, but he was on medication and had been holding down a job. He was also the only one in the group with some military experience. Some theories suggest that whatever happened that night, Mathias may have played a key role. His sneakers were found inside the Forest Service trailer, which suggested to some that he had been there with Weiher. Did he lead them up the mountain? Did something cause his psychiatric condition to flare up, leading to a paranoid and irrational decision? His family has always maintained that he would never have intentionally harmed his friends. So, what are the prevailing theories? Let's break them down. One simple theory is that they simply got lost. Perhaps Jack Madruga, who was driving, took a wrong turn in the dark. Maybe they were trying to find a shortcut or were just out for a joyride that went terribly wrong. Once they got stuck, panic set in. Not thinking clearly due to the cold and their cognitive conditions, they abandoned the car and tried to walk to safety, tragically underestimating the harshness of the wilderness. This explains the location, but not why they didn't push the car out or use the heater. Another theory suggests they were chased or followed. Some people reported seeing the men later that night in the company of others, or seeing a suspicious red pickup truck in the area. Could they have been fleeing from someone? This might explain why they drove up the treacherous mountain road and abandoned the car in a hurry. But there's no hard evidence to support a chase or any foul play. The car was undamaged, and there were no signs of a struggle. One of the most compelling pieces of this puzzle is the testimony of a man named Joseph Shantz. On the night the men disappeared, Shantz was driving up that same mountain road to check on his cabin before the big snowstorm hit. His own car got stuck in the snow. While trying to push it out, he started experiencing a heart attack. He got back in his car, keeping the engine on for warmth. He claims that later that night, he heard whistling and saw a group of people, including what appeared to be a woman holding a baby, walking up the road, their flashlights shining in the dark. A little while later he saw another set of headlights coming from behind him, a pickup truck, he thought. He yelled for help, but the figures and the truck fell silent and turned off their lights. Hours later, cold and in pain, Shantz managed to roll his car back down the mountain and get help. He only connected his experience to the missing men after their car was found in the exact spot he had been stuck. Were the figures he saw the Yuba County 5? If so, who was the woman with the baby and why didn't they help him? Could they have been so disoriented that they didn't understand his cries for help? The mystery of Gary Mathias is perhaps the most haunting loose end. Did he survive and simply walk away, starting a new life? It seems unlikely, given the conditions. Did he succumb to the elements in a part of the forest that has never been searched? His family believes he was the one who broke into the trailer and tried to care for Ted Weiher, wrapping him in blankets. Maybe after Weiher passed away, a grief-stricken and disoriented Mathias wandered off into the snow, never to be seen again. The fact that only his shoes were found in the trailer, and not his body, fuels endless speculation. Over 40 years later, the Yuba County 5 case remains officially unsolved. It's a heartbreaking story of 5 vulnerable young men who met a tragic end under the most mysterious of circumstances. The questions are endless. Why did they drive up that mountain? Why abandon a working car? Why did Ted Weiher starve with food all around him? And what happened to Gary Mathias? We may never know the full story. The silent mountains of Northern California hold the answers, and they aren't talking. What do you think happened that night? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this case as fascinating as I do, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.